In the rolling hills of Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, 7-year-old Emma Sullivan's life changes forever when her parents' car breaks down near an Amish farm. While her parents argue about directions, Emma wanders into the fields and meets Samuel Yoder, a gentle Amish farmer tending to his pregnant horse. When Emma innocently asks if she can carry his child, meaning the foal she sees him cradling, Samuel's warm laughter fills the air. But his response, "Come back in 15 years," plants a seed that will grow into something neither of them could have imagined. This is a story of two worlds colliding, of promises made in innocence and kept through faith, and of love that transcends the boundaries society draws between us. The Honda Civic's engine sputtered one last time before dying completely, steam rising from beneath the hood, like a surrender flag against the September sky. 7-year-old Emma Sullivan pressed her nose against the back seat window, watching the vapor curl and disappear into the crisp Pennsylvania air. Outside, endless fields of corn stretched toward the horizon, their golden stalks swaying in unison like an ocean of grain. "I told you we should have taken the interstate," her mother, Catherine, said, her voice tight with frustration. She clutched her cell phone, holding it high above her head, as if those extra inches might somehow catch a signal that wasn't there. "The GPS said this was faster," her father, Michael, replied, popping the hood. More steam billowed out, and he stepped back, waving his hand in front of his face. "Besides, when's the last time you checked the coolant in this thing? When's the last time you did anything without that stupid GPS telling you how?" Catherine shot back. Emma had heard this dance before, the sharp words that came when things went wrong, each parent finding fault in the other, like prospectors mining for blame. She quietly unbuckled her seatbelt and slipped out of the car, while they continued their familiar argument. The autumn air felt different here than it did back home in Philadelphia. It was cleaner somehow, carrying the scent of earth and growing things, instead of exhaust and concrete. Emma's red sneakers made soft crunching sounds on the gravel as she wandered toward the wooden fence that separated the road from the nearest field. Through the fence slats, she could see a man working near a barn that looked like something from one of her picture books, red with white trim, with a high-peaked roof and a weather vane shaped like a rooster spinning lazily in the breeze. The man wore dark clothes and a straw hat, and he moved with the kind of careful purpose Emma had seen in her grandfather before he passed away the previous winter. Without really thinking about it, the way children don't think about boundaries the same way adults do, Emma slipped through a gap in the fence. The field was muddy from recent rain, and her sneakers squelched with each step, but she didn't mind. There was something magnetic about the scene before her, something that pulled her forward like a whispered invitation. As she got closer, she could see the man more clearly. He had a beard but no mustache, which looked strange to her young eyes, like someone had forgotten to finish drawing his face. His hands were large and gentle as they moved over the swollen belly of a horse lying on its side in the hay. The horse's breathing was labored, and even from several yards away, Emma could see the worry creasing the man's weathered face. "Is your horse sick?" Emma asked, her small voice carrying across the space between them. The man looked up, startled. His eyes were the color of summer sky, kind but surprised. For a moment, he just stared at her, this small English girl in jeans and a purple jacket, standing in his barn like she'd materialized from thin air. "She's not sick," he said finally, his voice carrying a slight accent Emma couldn't place. "She's having a baby." Emma's eyes widened. She'd seen puppies being born on a nature documentary once, but never a horse. She crept closer, her curiosity overcoming any natural shyness. "Can I watch?" The man, Samuel Yoder, though Emma didn't know his name yet, considered this for a moment. He glanced toward the road, probably looking for her parents, then back at her earnest face. "Where are your mother and father?" "Fighting," Emma said matter-of-factly. "Our car broke." "They always fight when things break." Something shifted in Samuel's expression, a softness perhaps, or recognition. He nodded slowly. "You can watch, but you must be very quiet. Belle is nervous." Emma nodded solemnly and sat cross-legged in the hay a few feet away. She watched in fascination as Samuel continued his ministrations, speaking to the horse in low, soothing tones. Some of the words weren't English. They sounded older, more musical. "What are you saying to her?" Emma whispered. "I'm telling her she's brave," Samuel replied, not looking up from his work. "That her baby will be strong and healthy. That the pain will end." Emma watched his hands, how gentle they were despite their size, how they seemed to know exactly where to touch, where to apply pressure, where to simply rest and provide comfort. It was different from how her parents touched things when they were frustrated, all sharp movements and impatience. "My grandpa had hands like yours," she said suddenly, "before he went to heaven." Samuel glanced at her, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Did he now?" He could fix anything without getting mad at it. "Mum says I have his patience, but I don't know what that means exactly." "It means you know how to wait for good things," Samuel explained, adjusting his position as the horse shifted. "Like we're waiting now." They sat in companionable silence for several minutes. The only sounds, Belle's occasional whinnies and the rustling of hay. Then, suddenly, everything changed. Belle's whole body tensed, and Samuel moved quickly, his hands sure and steady. "It's coming," he said, and Emma could hear the excitement beneath his calm exterior. What happened next would stay with Emma for the rest of her life. In a rush of motion and miracle, a tiny foal emerged into the world, wet and impossibly delicate. Samuel worked quickly, clearing its airways, making sure it was breathing. The baby horse was the color of caramel, with a white star on its forehead, and when it opened its eyes for the first time, Emma felt something shift in her chest, a recognition of witnessing something sacred. "It's a girl," Samuel announced, sitting back on his heels with satisfaction. Belle was already trying to turn to see her baby, maternal instinct overcoming exhaustion. "She's beautiful," Emma breathed, scooting closer. "What will you name her?" "That's for my daughter to decide," Samuel said, using a towel to gently clean the foal. "She's been waiting for this one for a long time." Emma watched him lift the tiny horse with surprising ease, helping it find its wobbly legs for the first time. The sight of something so new to the world, trying to stand, made her heart feel too big for her chest. "Can I carry her?" Emma asked suddenly. "Your child, I mean the baby horse. Can I carry her?" Samuel looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time since she'd appeared in his barn. There was something in her face, maybe, or the way she'd said it. The innocence of the question, the confusion of terms that only a child could make. His eyes crinkled with warmth, and then he laughed, not at her, but with genuine delight at the sweetness of the moment. "You want to carry our child?" he asked, and there was something playful in his tone now. "You're too small yet, little one. Come back in 15 years. Then we'll see." Emma nodded seriously, as if they'd just made a solemn pact. 15 years, she repeated. "I'm 7 now, so that's when I'm..." She counted on her fingers. 22. "That's right," Samuel said, his attention returning to the foal as it took its first tentative steps. 22. "Emma," her mother's voice cut through the barn like a blade through silk. Emma turned to see both her parents standing at the entrance, her mother's face pale with worry that was quickly morphing into anger. Her father looking relieved and exasperated, in equal measure. "Emma Sullivan, what have you told you about wandering off?" Catherine rushed forward, grabbing Emma's hand. "I'm so sorry," she said to Samuel, barely looking at him. "She just disappeared. And she's been no trouble," Samuel said, standing slowly. He was taller than Emma had realized, and there was something solid about him, like a tree that had been growing in the same spot for generations. She watched Belle here give birth. Very quiet, very respectful, Michael stepped forward, extending his hand. "Michael Sullivan, thank you for looking after her. Our car broke down, and I saw the steam," Samuel said, shaking his hand. His grip was firm but not crushing. "My neighbor John Miller has a tow truck. I can walk to his farm and ask him to help if you'd like." Emma's parents exchanged glances. The kind of wordless communication that happens between people who've been married long enough to have whole conversations with just their eyes. That would be incredibly kind, Catherine said, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. Thank you. Samuel nodded and looked down at Emma. Would you like to say goodbye to the foal? Emma pulled free from her mother's grip and ran back to where the baby horse was now successfully nursing from Belle. She placed her small hand on its back, feeling the warmth of new life beneath her palm. Bye, baby, she whispered. I'll come back when I'm 22. I promise. Samuel smiled at that, and something passed between him and Emma's parents. Maybe amusement at a child's earnest promise, maybe recognition of the innocence that allows children to make friends across any divide. As they walked back to the road, Emma turned to wave. Samuel stood in the barn doorway, silhouetted against the dim interior, and raised his hand in return. The image burned itself into Emma's memory. The man, the barn, the golden afternoon light, and the promise of return. The Sullivan family never made it to their intended destination that day. By the time John Miller's tow truck had pulled their Honda to his small repair shop, the sun was painting the horizon in shades of amber and rose. The part they needed wouldn't arrive until Monday. It was Saturday, which meant finding somewhere to stay in a town that didn't even appear on most maps. There's a bed and breakfast about 2 miles down the road, John Miller had said, wiping his hands on an oil-stained rag. He was Amish too, though Emma noticed his beard was grey, where Samuel's had been brown. Ruth Byler runs it. She takes in English guests sometimes. That's how Emma learned the word English. It's what the Amish called everyone who wasn't them, her father explained, as they walked along the country road, their suitcases rolling awkwardly over the uneven ground. It wasn't mean, he said, just descriptive, like how they called themselves Philadelphians. Ruth Byler's bed and breakfast was a sprawling white farmhouse, with green shutters and a wraparound porch that creaked pleasantly under their feet. Ruth herself was a small, round woman with kind eyes and quick hands that never seemed to stop moving, adjusting a doily here, straightening a picture there, all while showing them to their rooms and explaining breakfast times. You're the family from the Yoder farm, she said. It wasn't a question. Samuel's already sent word that you might need a place. Emma perked up at Samuel's name. Do you know him? Since he was born, Ruth said, her English carefully pronounced but warm. His mother and I quilted together for 40 years before the Lord called her home. That evening, while her parents sat on the porch discussing the car repairs and their disrupted weekend plans, Emma explored the house. It was different from any place she'd ever stayed. No television, no computer, no familiar hum of electronics. Instead, there were oil lamps that cast dancing shadows on the walls, handmade quilts that told stories in their patterns, and a silence that wasn't empty but full of small sounds. The tick of a wind-up clock, the settling of old wood, the distant lowing of cattle. In the parlor, she found a bookshelf filled with volumes that looked older than her parents. She pulled one out carefully, a book of Bible stories with illustrations that seemed to glow even in the lamplight. She was tracing her finger along a picture of Noah's Ark when she heard voices from the kitchen. Tragic, really, Ruth was saying to someone. Sarah would have been about the English girl's age now. God's will is not always ours to understand, another woman's voice replied, speaking in the same accented English. Still, to lose a child and a wife in the same year. Samuel's faith was tested more than most. Emma knew she shouldn't eavesdrop. Her mother had told her many times it was rude, but she couldn't help leaning closer to the doorway. He seems better lately, the other woman said. Did you see him at the barn raising last week? He actually smiled when the Stoltzfus boys got into that hay fight. Time heals, but it never forgets, Ruth said, and there was a sound of dishes being washed. Maybe seeing that English child today stirred something. John Miller said she was in the barn when Belle delivered. Samuel let an English child watch. Apparently she just appeared. You know how children are. They don't see the same boundaries we do. Emma crept back to the parlor, her mind turning over what she'd heard. Samuel had a daughter who would have been her age. The past tense sat heavy in her chest. the way it had when people started talking about her grandfather in past tense. Later, when her mother tucked her into the high, unfamiliar bed, Emma asked, "What happens when someone loses a child?" Catherine's hand stilled on Emma's forehead. "Why are you asking that, sweetheart? I heard Mrs. Byler talking. She said Samuel lost a daughter." Her mother sighed, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Sometimes very sad things happen to people. Parents aren't supposed to lose children. It goes against the natural order of things. When it happens, it leaves a kind of hurt that never fully goes away. Like when Grandpa died. Similar, but different. We expect to lose our parents someday, even though it's hard. But a child," Catherine's voice trailed off. "Why don't you say a prayer for Mr. Samuel tonight? I'm sure he could use it." Emma nodded and closed her eyes, folding her hands the way her grandmother had taught her. She prayed for Samuel, for the baby horse, for Belle, and for the daughter who would have been her age. She prayed that the hurt would get smaller, even if it never went away completely. The next morning, Sunday, Emma woke to the sound of bells, not the electric buzz of her alarm clock at home, but real bells, bronze and deep, calling across the valley. She dressed quickly and ran to the window. In the distance, she could see buggies moving along the road like a parade of shadows against the morning mist. "They're going to church," her father said from the doorway. He was holding 2 cups of coffee, one for him and one for her mother, who appeared beside him still in her bathrobe. "Can we go?" Emma asked. "It's not our church, sweetheart," Catherine said. "They have their own ways." But Emma continued to watch until the last buggy disappeared over the hill. There was something about the procession that made her think of her grandfather's funeral, the solemnity, the community, the sense of something larger than just the individual people. After breakfast, which included the best apple butter Emma had ever tasted, Ruth suggested they might enjoy a walk through the covered bridge nearby. "It's historic," she said. "Built in 1842, tourists sometimes come just to take pictures." The walk was pleasant, the early October air crisp, but not cold. Emma ran ahead of her parents, her feet thundering on the wooden planks of the bridge. The sound echoed in the enclosed space, and she laughed at how loud she could be. On the other side of the bridge, they found a small park with a bench overlooking a creek. While her parents sat and actually talked, not argued, but really talked, for the first time in what felt like months, Emma explored the water's edge. She was building a small dam out of sticks when she heard the clip-clop of horse hooves. Looking up, she saw a buggy approaching. As it drew closer, she recognized Samuel holding the reins. Beside him sat a woman in a dark dress and white cap, and in the back were 3 children. 2 boys and a girl, all older than Emma. Samuel saw them and pulled the horses to a stop. "Good morning," he called out. "How are you finding your stay?" Michael stood and walked over. "Very well, thank you. Mrs. Byler has been wonderful. This is my wife Hannah," Samuel said, and the woman nodded politely but didn't speak. "And our children, Jacob, Daniel, and Mary." Emma stared at them, confused. Ruth had said Samuel lost a daughter, but there was Mary, probably about 12, looking back at her with curious eyes. "How's the baby horse?" Emma asked, addressing Samuel. "Strong," he said, and there was warmth in his eyes. "Stood up on her own this morning and hasn't stopped trying to run since." "What did you name her?" Samuel glanced at Mary, who shifted shyly. "Star," the girl said quietly. "Because of the mark on her head." "That's perfect," Emma said earnestly, like she was kissed by the sky. Mary smiled at that, a small, hesitant thing, but genuine. "We should go," Hannah said quietly, speaking for the first time. Her voice was gentle, but firm. "The Millers are expecting us." Samuel nodded and gathered the reins, but before he left, he looked directly at Emma. 15 years. He said with a slight smile. "Don't forget." "I won't," Emma promised, not understanding why the adults all exchanged glances, or why Hannah's expression tightened, just slightly. As the buggy rolled away, Catherine put her hand on Emma's shoulder. "What was that about 15 years? He said I could come back then," Emma said simply. to carry the baby horse. Her parents shared one of those looks again, but said nothing. They left Lancaster County the next afternoon, their car repaired and running smoothly. As they drove past the Yoder farm, Emma pressed her face to the window, hoping for one last glimpse of Samuel or Star. But the barn doors were closed, and the fields were empty except for the corn, standing sentinel in neat rows. "Can we come back?" Emma asked, as the farm disappeared behind them. "Maybe someday," her mother said in that way that usually meant no. But Emma held the promise in her heart like a seed. 15 years. She was good at waiting. Her grandfather had said so, and promises, real promises, were meant to be kept. The drive home was quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet than the trip out. Her parents held hands over the center console, and every now and then, her father would say something that made her mother laugh softly. Emma thought about Samuel and his family, about Belle and Star, about the daughter he'd lost, and the one he still had. She pulled out the small notebook her grandmother had given her for her birthday and began to draw. It wasn't very good. She was only 7 after all, but she captured the essence of it. A barn, a man in a hat, a baby horse taking its first steps. At the bottom, in her careful looping handwriting, she wrote, "October 3rd, the day I made a promise." She didn't know then that she would fill dozens of notebooks over the years, all of them returning somehow to that day, to that barn, to that promise. She didn't know that life would take her far from Pennsylvania, through trials she couldn't imagine, and joys she hadn't yet learned to hope for. All she knew was that something important had happened in that barn, something that went beyond words or understanding. And someday in 15 years, she would return to find out what it meant. This chapter develops the cultural context, reveals Samuel's tragic backstory, losing his first daughter Sarah, introduces his current family, Hannah, his second wife, and their children, and deepens the connection between Emma and this Amish community. It also shows the impact this encounter has had on Emma's family dynamics, and sets up Emma's determination to keep her promise. 5 years passed like pages turning in a book, some slow and deliberate, others flipping by so fast Emma could barely register their passing. She was 12 now, all knobby knees and elbows, caught in that awkward space between childhood and whatever came next. The notebook from that day in Lancaster County had been joined by many others, all stored in a box under her bed that she'd labeled important things in black Sharpie. The Sullivan family had moved twice since that October day, first to Baltimore for her father's job, then to Boston when her parents decided they needed a fresh start. Emma had learned that fresh start was adult code for trying to save our marriage, though the trying seemed to create more problems than it solved. She sat now in her room in their Boston apartment, rain streaking the windows as she did her homework. Social studies, a unit on American cultures. When the teacher had assigned them to research and present on a unique American community, Emma hadn't hesitated. "The Amish," she'd announced, and Mrs. Patterson had nodded approvingly. "That's an excellent choice, Emma. Do you have any personal connection to the topic?" "I met an Amish family once," Emma said, not elaborating. How could she explain that single day that had somehow lodged itself in her memory like a splinter, not painful, but always there, always felt? She'd thrown herself into the research with an intensity that surprised even her. Library books stacked on her desk, websites bookmarked, documentaries watched. She learned about the Ordnung, the unwritten rules that governed Amish life. She learned about Rumspringa, the time when Amish teenagers could experience the outside world before choosing baptism. She learned about shunning, about the different orders of Amish, about why they dressed the way they did and lived the way they lived. But none of it told her what she really wanted to know. Was Samuel okay? Had Star grown strong? Did Mary still smile that shy smile? "Emma, dinner," her mother called from the kitchen. Emma closed her laptop and made her way to the dining room, where her parents sat at opposite ends of the table, a new development that had started 3 months ago. They said it was because her father needed room to spread out his work papers. But Emma wasn't stupid. She could read the geography of a failing marriage in the distance between their plates. "How's the project going?" her father asked, serving himself salad. "Good. Did you know the Amish population doubles every 20 years? They have large families, and most of their children choose to stay in the faith." "Interesting," her mother said, though she was scrolling through her phone. "Make sure you include multiple sources. Mrs. Patterson is strict about citation." Emma wanted to tell them about her real research, how she'd found Lancaster County census records, how she'd learned that the Yoder farm had been in Samuel's family for 6 generations, how she'd discovered that his first wife had been named Rebecca, and she'd died in childbirth, along with their daughter Sarah. But these felt like secrets, somehow. Private things that weren't meant to be shared over dinner tables where parents sat too far apart. "I was thinking," Emma said carefully, cutting her chicken, "maybe we could visit Lancaster County again, for my project. Primary source research looks really good on college applications." Both parents looked up at that. "College applications?" her father said. "Emma, you're 12. I know, but Mrs. Patterson says it's never too early to start thinking about building a strong academic portfolio." Her parents exchanged a glance, one of the few times they'd actually looked at each other all week. "That's quite a drive for a school project," her mother said. "We could make it a weekend trip," Emma suggested. "There are lots of historical sites around there. Educational. We'll think about it," her father said, which Emma knew meant no. That night, she pulled out the original notebook, the one with the drawing of the barn. Her artistic skills had improved over the years, and she'd redrawn the scene many times, each version a little more detailed, a little more accurate. But she always returned to the original, to those shaky lines and that careful promise at the bottom. 10 more years. It seemed like an eternity. She opened her laptop and on impulse typed Samuel Yoder, Lancaster County into Google. She didn't expect to find anything. The Amish didn't exactly have Facebook pages, but there was one hit. A newspaper article from 2 years ago about a barn race. There was a photo, and in the background she could make out a figure that might have been Samuel. The caption mentioned that the barn was being built for the Yoder family after theirs was struck by lightning. Lightning. Their barn, the barn where she'd watched Star being born, had been destroyed. Emma felt an unexpected twist of grief, as if she'd lost something personal. She was so absorbed in the article that she didn't hear her mother enter until Catherine spoke. "What are you reading?" Emma quickly minimized the window. "Just research for my project." Her mother sat on the edge of the bed, and Emma could smell her perfume, the expensive kind she'd started wearing after the move to Boston. "You know, I remember that day too." Emma looked up, surprised. Her parents rarely talked about the trip anymore. "You disappeared, and I was terrified," Catherine continued. "But when we found you in that barn, watching that foal being born, you looked so peaceful, so complete somehow, like you'd found exactly where you were supposed to be." "It was amazing," Emma said softly. "Your father and I, we actually talked that night. Really talked. For the first time in months." Her mother's voice was wistful. There was something about that place, that simplicity. It made our problems seem both smaller and more fixable. "So why can't we go back?" Catherine sighed. "Because going back doesn't fix things, Emma. It just reminds you of what you've lost." After her mother left, Emma lay in the dark, thinking about that. Was that what memory was? A catalogue of losses? Or was it something else? A thread connecting who you were to who you might become? She must have fallen asleep, because suddenly she was dreaming. She was in the barn again, but she was older, 22, like she'd promised. Samuel was there, but his beard was grey now, and Star was fully grown, magnificent and strong. "You came back," he said in the dream. "I promised," she replied. "Promises are easy when you're 7, harder when you understand what they cost." "What will it cost?" But before he could answer, she woke to the sound of her parents arguing in the kitchen. Not yelling, They'd moved past that to something colder, more surgical. Words chosen for precision rather than passion. Emma pulled her pillow over her head, but she could still hear them. Her father saying something about emotional distance, her mother responding with physical absence. Back and forth, like they were reading from a script they'd memorized without meaning to. She grabbed her phone and earbuds, scrolling to a podcast she'd found about Amish life. The host was interviewing a woman who had left the faith, and Emma listened to her describe the difficulty of the choice, the pain of leaving family behind, the challenge of adapting to English life. But the hardest part, the woman said, was losing the certainty. In the Amish world, you know who you are, where you belong, what's expected. Out here, you have to decide everything for yourself. That freedom, it's both wonderful and terrifying. Emma understood that feeling, even at 12. The freedom to choose felt overwhelming when you weren't sure what you wanted or who you were supposed to be. The next day at school, she presented her project. She'd created a poster board with photos and facts, a timeline of Amish history, explanations of their beliefs and practices. She spoke about the importance of community, the value of simplicity, the strength found in tradition. "Have you ever actually met any Amish people?" a classmate asked during the Q&A. "Once," Emma said, "when I was 7. That's it? Just once?" Emma nodded, but inside she thought, once was enough. Once could change everything if you let it. Mrs. Patterson gave her an A, with a note that said, "Excellent research, Emma. Your personal connection to the material really shines through." That afternoon her mother picked her up from school, unusual, since Emma usually took the bus. "I have something to tell you," Catherine said, once they were in the car. "Your father and I have made a decision." Emma's stomach dropped. She knew what was coming before the words were spoken. "We're getting divorced." The word hung in the air like a physical thing. Divorce. Such a final sound to it, like a door closing. "We both love you very much," her mother continued, the words rehearsed. "This isn't about you. We've grown in different directions." Damn. Emma thought about the Amish, how they grew in the same direction their whole lives, planted in the same soil, reaching for the same sun. Maybe that was restrictive, but at least they knew where they stood. "Will we move again?" she asked. "No. We're staying in Boston. Your father is getting an apartment nearby. You'll spend weekends with him." Emma nodded, staring out the window at the city passing by, all concrete and glass. No fields or barns or promises that meant something. That night, she wrote in her newest notebook, October 5th, 5 years since the barn. 10 years until I go back. Today my parents told me they're getting divorced. I wonder if Samuel knows that sometimes English families break apart just like barns in lightning storms. I wonder if the Amish way is better, staying together even when it's hard, or maybe both ways have their own kind of pain. I still want to keep my promise, maybe even more now, because promises should mean something, even when everything else falls apart. She closed the notebook and put it in the box with the others. 10 more years. She could wait. She was good at waiting. But waiting, she was learning, wasn't passive. It was its own kind of action, its own kind of choice. Every day she didn't forget was a day she chose to remember. Every day she held on to that promise was a day she decided it still mattered. Outside her window, Boston glittered with electric lights, so different from the oil lamps of Lancaster County. But somewhere out there, she knew Samuel was probably sitting down to dinner with his family, Hannah and Jacob and Daniel and Mary, in a house lit by flame instead of filament. She wondered if he ever thought about the English girl who'd wandered into his barn. She wondered if he remembered the promise at all. 10 more years, and she would find out. At 17, Emma Sullivan looked nothing like the 7-year-old who had wandered into a barn a decade ago. Her hair, once wild and untamed, was now carefully straightened each morning. Her clothes were chosen to blend in rather than stand out. She had learned the art of being invisible in plain sight. a skill developed through 5 years of shuttling between her divorced parents' homes, being the new kid in 3 different high schools, and navigating the complex social hierarchies of teenage life. She sat now in her father's apartment in Chicago. They'd moved again, of course, staring at the acceptance letter in her hands. University of Pennsylvania. Early admission to their rural sociology program. Her essay about the intersection of tradition and modernity in American communities, heavily influenced by her ongoing fascination with the Amish, had apparently impressed the admissions committee. Penn State would have been closer to Lancaster County, she'd told her father when the acceptance came. But Penn is Ivy League, Michael had replied, not understanding that proximity to Lancaster County was precisely the point. Her phone buzzed, a text from her mother, who was in Seattle now with her new husband, Richard, a tech executive, who couldn't understand why Emma refused to upgrade her phone or join social media. "Congratulations again, sweetheart. Richard says he knows someone at Penn who could help with internships." Emma didn't reply. She'd learned that her mother's new life required minimal interaction, just enough to maintain the fiction that distance hadn't changed their relationship. Instead, she opened her laptop and navigated to a forum she'd discovered 2 years ago, a discussion board for people interested in plain communities. She'd never posted, just lurked, reading stories from former Amish, from English people who'd married into the faith, from academics studying these communities. But tonight, she created an account, Promise Keeper. Her first post was simple. Has anyone ever made a promise to someone from an Amish community and actually kept it years later? What happened? Within an hour, she had responses. Most were skeptical. Why would the Amish person remember? Why would it matter? But one response caught her attention, from a user named Bridge Builder. I made a friend in an Amish community when I was young. Promised to write. Did for 15 years. Never missed a month. When I finally visited again, he said those letters had been a window to the world for him, helped him understand English life without judgment. Sometimes the promises that seem smallest carry the most weight. Emma stared at that response for a long time. Then she opened the box under her bed. She'd carried it through every move and pulled out all her notebooks. Dozens of them now, filled with drawings, research, memories, and questions. She documented everything she could find about Lancaster County, about Amish life, about the Yoder family. It was bordering on obsessive, she knew, but it felt important somehow, like she was preparing for something. Her phone rang. Her best friend, Jade, from her school in Boston. They'd stayed in touch despite Emma's move. "So, Pennsylvania," Jade said without preamble. "That's amazing. We can actually visit each other now. I'm only like 2 hours from Philly." "Yeah, it's great," Emma said, trying to match Jade's enthusiasm. "You don't sound excited." "Emma, it's Penn. It's incredible. I know, I am excited. It's just what..." Emma had never told anyone about the promise. Not Jade, not her therapist during the divorce, not the boy she'd dated briefly junior year. It felt too personal, too strange. How did you explain that a single day when you were 7 had shaped everything that came after? "It's just a big change," she said finally. "Change is good. Change is necessary. Remember what Ms. Martinez always said, growth requires discomfort." After they hung up, Emma looked at the calendar. 5 more years. She'd be 22, just like she'd calculated that day in the barn. She wondered what she'd be like then. Would she have a job, a boyfriend? Would she still care about a promise made by a child to a man who probably didn't remember her? She opened a new notebook, this one leather-bound, a graduation gift from her grandmother, and began to write, 17 years old, 5 years left. Sometimes I wonder if I'm crazy, holding on to this promise like it means something. Everyone makes plans and breaks them. Everyone says things they don't mean. But that day felt different, sacred, somehow, like I witnessed something beyond just a birth. I saw a way of life that knew what it valued and why. And in all the chaos of my life since, the moves, the divorce, the constant change that memory has been the one solid thing. She paused, then continued, I've researched enough to know that if I do go back, I'll be an outsider. The Amish are kind to visitors, but cautious. They've been burned before by English curiosity, by people who treat them like tourist attractions. But I'm not going back as a tourist. I'm going back to keep a promise. Even if Samuel doesn't remember, even if it means nothing to anyone but me. A knock on her door interrupted her writing. Her father entered, carrying 2 cups of hot chocolate, their tradition since the divorce, a weekly ritual maintained despite the geography between them. Thought you might want to celebrate properly, he said, handing her a mug. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Her relationship with her father had evolved into something quieter than before, built on shared silence rather than forced conversation. You know, he said finally, I've been thinking about that trip. Emma looked up, confused. What trip? The one where our car broke down. Lancaster County. Emma's heart skipped. Her father rarely mentioned that day. Your mother and I, we almost fixed things that weekend. There was something about that place, those people, the simplicity of it, made us remember why we'd fallen in love in the first place. He took a sip of his chocolate, but then we came back to real life, and real life has a way of eroding even the best intentions. Do you ever think about going back? Emma asked carefully. Sometimes, but going back feels like admitting defeat. Somehow, like acknowledging that we can't make it work in the world we've chosen. Maybe that's not defeat. Maybe it's wisdom. Her father smiled sadly. When did you get so philosophical? Rural sociology major. Remember? He laughed at that, and Emma felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the hot chocolate. Later that night, unable to sleep, Emma found herself back on the forum. Bridge Builder had sent her a private message. I saw from your post history that you're starting at Penn. I'm actually a professor there. Dr. James Hartley, American Studies Department. If you're interested in plain communities, I run a research project that might interest you. We work directly with Amish families who are willing to share their perspectives. It's respectful, academic, and maintains appropriate boundaries. Let me know if you'd like to learn more. Emma stared at the message. It felt like fate, or providence, or whatever you called it when the universe seemed to conspire in your favor. She wrote back, I'm very interested. There's a specific community in Lancaster County I'd like to reconnect with. Would that be possible? The response came quickly. Lancaster County is where we do most of our work. Many families there have partnered with us for years. Which community? Emma hesitated, then typed, the Yoder family. Samuel Yoder specific. There was a longer pause before the next response. Samuel Yoder is one of our most respected partners. He's helped us understand Amish perspectives on child rearing and loss. His story is quite remarkable. You know him? We met once. When I was 7. He told me to come back in 15 years. And you're planning to? When I'm 22? Yes. That's the kind of commitment we rarely see. I'd very much like to meet you when you arrive at Penn. Perhaps we can discuss how to make your return meaningful for both you and the Yoder family. Emma closed the laptop, her heart racing. It was real now, not just a child's fantasy, but an actual plan. She could research, prepare, approach this properly. She could keep her promise in a way that honored both her 7-year-old self and the woman she was becoming. She pulled out her phone and scrolled to a photo she'd saved. The newspaper clipping about the barn raising, the one where she thought she'd seen Samuel in the background. She'd looked at it so many times she had it memorized. But tonight she noticed something new. In the corner of the photo, barely visible, was a young woman who might have been Mary. She'd be about 22 now, Emma realized. The same age Emma would be when she returned. Time was such a strange thing. 10 years had felt like forever when she was 7 now. 5 years felt like nothing at all. She wondered how time felt to Samuel, living by seasons and harvests instead of semesters and deadlines. Did he mark the years differently? Did he remember the English girl who'd asked to carry his child, meaning the foal but creating a moment of linguistic confusion that still made Emma smile? She opened the leather notebook again and drew. Not the barn this time, but a bridge, like the covered bridge they'd walked through that Sunday morning. On one side she drew herself as she was now 17, uncertain, caught between worlds. On the other side she drew a question mark, because that's what 22 was, a question waiting to be answered. Would she have the courage to actually go? Would Samuel remember? Would it matter? 5 more years to find out. 5 more years to become someone worthy of keeping such a long-held promise. 5 more years to bridge the space between the girl who made her A's and the woman who would keep it. The University of Pennsylvania campus buzzed with autumn energy as Emma walked across the quad, her backpack heavy with books about rural communities, cultural anthropology, and religious studies. She was 20 now, a junior, and had become something of a campus legend in the rural sociology department, the girl who'd built her entire academic career around a promise made in a barn. Dr. James Hartley's office had become her second home. The walls were covered with photographs from his fieldwork, Amish barn raisings, Mennonite markets, Hutterite colonies, but the photo Emma always found herself staring at was newer, taken just last summer. Samuel Yoder, standing with a group of English students, explaining something about traditional farming methods. His beard was indeed graying now, as she'd imagined it would be, but his eyes held the same kindness she remembered. "You're early," Dr. Hartley said, entering with 2 cups of coffee. He'd learned her schedule, her habits, her dedication to this work that went beyond academic interest. "I wanted to talk about the summer immersion program," Emma said, accepting the coffee gratefully. "You're only a junior. The program is typically for graduate students." "I know, but I'll be 21 this summer. 1 year before." She stopped herself. She'd told Dr. Hartley about the promise, but she tried not to seem too obsessive about it. 1 year before your promised return, he finished with a slight smile. "Emma, I've been thinking about this. You've built your entire undergraduate career around this moment. What happens after?" It was a question she'd avoided. 22 had become such a fixed point in her imagination that she'd barely thought beyond it. "I don't know," she admitted. "Have you considered that Samuel might not remember, or that he might remember but think it was just a casual comment to a child?" Every day, Dr. Hartley leaned back in his chair. "I've been corresponding with Samuel for 3 years now. He's never mentioned you specifically, but he has talked about the English fascination with promises and time. He said something interesting once. The English make promises to the future. The Amish make promises to God. Only one of those is guaranteed to be there when you arrive." Emma turned that over in her mind. "Do you think he was talking about me? I think Samuel Yoder is a man who remembers everything but speaks of very little. Did you know he's become something of an elder in his community? After the barn fire, when they rebuilt, his was the first barn raising to allow English volunteers in over a decade. He said it was about building bridges, not just barns." Emma's heart quickened. "He said that?" "He did. He also has a daughter, Mary, who's been accepted into their community's teaching program. She'll be instructing the young ones, very unusual for an unmarried woman her age." "She's not married?" "No. There was apparently some interest from a young man in a neighboring community, but she declined. Samuel told me she said she was waiting for God's timing, not man's." Emma thought about Mary, that shy 12-year-old who'd named the foal Star. She'd be 22 now, the same age Emma would be next year. "I want to do the immersion program," Emma said firmly. "Not to see Samuel, I'll wait for that, but to understand better, to be prepared." Dr. Hartley studied her for a long moment. "There's something else. Samuel's eldest son, Jacob, left the faith last year. During his Rumspringa, he decided not to return. He's living in Philadelphia now, actually, working construction." Emma's breath caught. "He left?" "It happens more than the Amish like to admit. About 10–15% choose not to be baptized. But for a family like the Yoders, with their standing in the community, it's particularly difficult. Can't Samuel still talk to him? Because Jacob was never baptized. He's not shunned, but the relationship is strained. Samuel told me it was like watching his son choose to live in a burning building when a safe home was available. That afternoon, Emma had her weekly video call with her parents. Another COVID-era habit that had stuck even after the pandemic ended. Her mother was in Seattle, her father in Chicago, and Emma in Philadelphia, 3 points of a triangle that never connected. "You look tired," her mother said, concerned. "Are you sleeping? Just busy with research," Emma replied. "Still the Amish thing?" her father asked. He'd never quite understood how a single day had spawned a college major. "It's not a thing, Dad. It's my concentration. And yes, I just worry you're limiting yourself," Catherine said. "There's a whole world out there." Emma wanted to say that sometimes the whole world was too much, that sometimes finding one true thing and holding on to it was better than having endless options. But she just nodded and changed the subject. After the call, she walked to her favorite spot on campus, a small garden behind the anthropology building where few students went. She'd discovered it freshman year and had been coming here to think ever since. She was surprised to find someone already there, a young man in jeans and a plain t-shirt, sitting on the bench she usually occupied. Something about his posture, the way he held himself, seemed familiar. "I'm sorry," he said, starting to stand. "I didn't know anyone else came here." His accent, that slight Pennsylvania Dutch inflection. Emma's heart raced. "You're Amish," she said. Then, correcting herself, "We're Amish." He smiled sadly. "Jacob Yoder, and you're Emma Sullivan." Emma's legs felt weak. She sat down beside him, trying to process this impossible coincidence. "How did you—" "Dr. Hartley told me about you. The English girl who met my father when you were 7, who's been studying our ways ever since." He looked at her sideways. "He didn't mention you were what?" "Never mind." He looked away. "I shouldn't be here. I just wanted to see who you were. This girl who made a promise to return. Your father remembers." Jacob laughed, but it wasn't entirely happy. "My father remembers everything. Every face, every promise, every loss. He mentioned you once, years ago, said an English girl would come back when she was 22 to claim what was promised. Claim what was. I just wanted to see Star again. The foal. Star died 3 years ago," Jacob said quietly. "Colic. It happened fast." Emma felt the loss like a physical blow. Star was supposed to be there when she returned. It was part of the picture she'd held in her mind all these years. "I'm sorry," Jacob said, "but that's not what my father meant anyway, about claiming what was promised." "What did he mean?" Jacob was quiet for a long moment. "Do you know about my sister, Sarah? I know she died when she was born. She would have been your age almost exactly. My father, he never got over it. Then you showed up in the barn, the same age Sarah would have been, on the day Star was born." He said it was like God was showing him something, but he didn't know what. And now his eldest son has left the faith. His daughter Mary refuses to marry, and his wife Hannah grows more distant each year. The community whispers that the Yoder family is cursed, that my father's pride in allowing English influence has brought judgment. That's not fair. Fair isn't a word that means much in our world. There's God's will and human action. The space between them is where we live. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of shared understanding between them. "Why did you leave?" Emma asked finally. "Because I couldn't breathe," Jacob said simply. "Because I had questions that weren't allowed to have answers. Because I wanted to choose my faith, not inherit it." He paused. "My father understood, I think, but understanding and accepting are different things. Do you regret it, every day, and also never?" He stood to leave, then turned back. "When you go next year, and I know you will, be careful. My father has built you up in his mind as something you might not be. A sign, maybe, or a test. Or just a reminder of all the what-ifs a man accumulates over a lifetime? What should I be? Yourself. 7 years old, making a promise you didn't understand. 22, keeping it anyway. That's enough. That has to be enough. After he left, Emma sat in the garden until dark, rethinking everything she thought she knew. The promise had become so large in her mind, but maybe it was simpler than she'd made it. Maybe it was just about showing up, about being the kind of person who did what they said they'd do, even when, especially when it no longer made logical sense. She called Dr. Hartley that night. I want to meet with Jacob Yoder regularly. If he's willing, I want to understand his perspective before I go. That's wise, Dr. Hartley said. But Emma, be careful. Jacob is navigating his own complicated relationship with his past. Don't let his pain become yours. But Emma thought maybe that's what promises were, taking on a piece of someone else's pain, carrying it until it transformed into something else. Understanding, maybe. Or just the simple human act of showing up when you said you would. 2 more years. 2 more years to understand, not just the Amish, but the specific weight of being a Yoder. 2 more years to prepare for a return that might mean nothing, or everything, depending on who was doing the measuring. She opened her newest notebook and began to write. 20 years old, 2 years left. Today I met Jacob Yoder and learned that Star is dead. The picture I've held in my mind all these years has changed. But maybe that's what growing up means, learning that promises aren't about preserving the past, but about honoring it while moving forward. I'm going back, but not to the barn I remember. I'm going to whatever that barn has become, to whoever Samuel has become, to whoever I've become. The promise remains the same, even as everything else changes. Emma's 21st birthday came with spring rain and a card from Samuel Yoder. She stared at the envelope for a full minute before opening it, her hands trembling. Dr. Hartley had brought it to her, saying only, "This came through my research correspondence. He asked me to give it to you." The card was simple, handmade. Inside, in careful handwriting, "Miss Emma Sullivan, I am told you study our ways at the university. My son Jacob speaks well of you. Time moves in circles, not lines. What was promised will be waiting. Samuel Yoder." Emma read it 12 times before she realized she was crying. "He remembers," she whispered to Dr. Hartley, who sat across from her in his office, pretending to grade papers but really watching her reaction. "He does," Dr. Hartley confirmed. "He asked about you last month. Said he wanted to know if the English girl had grown into the woman he thought she might become." "What did you tell him?" "The truth. That you're brilliant, dedicated, and slightly obsessed with keeping a promise most people would have forgotten." Emma traced the handwriting with her finger. "Jacob says his father sees me as some kind of sign. Jacob is angry at his father. He sees everything through that lens." Over the past year, Emma and Jacob had developed an unlikely friendship. He'd taught her Pennsylvania Dutch phrases, explained the intricate social dynamics of Amish communities, and shared stories about growing up Yoder. In return, she'd helped him navigate English life, college applications, job interviews, the 1,000 small negotiations required by the modern world. "I'm not going back to fix their family," Emma said, though she wondered if that's exactly what everyone expected. "No," Dr. Hartley agreed, "but your return will change things. It always does when the past circles back to the present." That summer, Emma finally did the immersion program, though not in Lancaster County, that felt too close to breaking her promise early. Instead, she went to an Amish community in Ohio, living with a family for 3 months, learning their rhythms and routines. The Millers, no relation to the John Miller who towed their car so many years ago, were patient teachers. Emma learned to milk cows at 4 a.m., to can vegetables in August heat, to sew straight seams by lamplight. She attended church services, though she couldn't understand most of the High German, and sat with the women during community meals, listening to their gentle gossip and deeper wisdom. "You're not like the other English students," Martha Miller told her, one evening as they quilted together. "You're not here to gawk, you're here to prepare." "Prepare for what?" Martha's needle never paused in its steady rhythm. for whatever God has planned. It's written all over you. You're a girl with a purpose. Emma wanted to ask if purposes could be self-imposed, if a 7-year-old's promise counted as God's plan, but she kept quiet. She'd learned that silence often taught more than questions. When she returned to Penn for her senior year, she was different, calmer, maybe, or just more certain. Her thesis advisor commented on it. "You've found your voice, Emma. The academic distance is gone. You're writing from within now, even as an observer." Her thesis was titled Promises and Time, Longitudinal Commitment in Transient Cultures. It was about the Amish, ostensibly, but it was really about herself, about what it meant to keep a promise in a world that had forgotten how. Jacob read the first draft in her apartment near campus, his expression growing more complex with each page. "You understand us better than I do sometimes," he said finally. "I understand the view from the outside looking in. You understand the view from the inside looking out. Neither is complete." Very philosophical, Professor Sullivan. Emma threw a pillow at him. They developed an easy friendship, though she sometimes caught him looking at her with an expression she couldn't read. "My father's wife left," he said suddenly. Emma's head snapped up. "Hannah left." "Not permanently. She went to care for her sick mother in Indiana. But she's been gone 3 months now, and Mary is running the household. My father, he's different, quieter. How's Mary handling it? Like she handles everything with perfect competence and hidden frustration. She's 23 now. Every eligible man in 3 districts has tried to court her. She refuses them all." "Why?" Jacob shrugged. "She says she's waiting for a sign. My father jokes that the Yoder family has gotten too good at waiting for signs that may never come." "Is that about me?" "Everything in my family is a little bit about you now," Jacob said, but not unkindly. "You've become a story we tell ourselves. The English girl who keeps promises, the return that's coming, the change that might happen. That's too much pressure. That's the Amish way. Everything carries the weight of everything else." Winter came early that year, and with it, a decision Emma had been postponing. Her professors assumed she'd go to graduate school. She'd been accepted everywhere she'd applied. Her mother wanted her to take a job in Seattle at Richard's company, just to try something different. Her father thought she should travel, see the world before you settle down. But Emma knew what she was going to do. She was going to Lancaster County, not just for a visit, but to live. To work with Dr. Hartley on his research, to be there when she turned 22 in October. "You're really going through with this," Jade said over video chat. Her college best friend was in law school now, practical and focused. "Emma, you've built your entire life around a promise you made when you were 7. I know. What if it's anticlimactic? What if you show up and he's like, 'Oh, nice to see you,' and that's it? Then at least I'll know." "Know what?" Emma thought about it. "Whether I'm the kind of person who keeps promises or just someone who got stuck in a moment and couldn't move forward." She started preparing for the move in January, found an apartment in Lancaster, a job at the local library that would pay rent while she worked on her research. She told her parents separately, watching their similar reactions of concern and confusion. "You're moving there? To Amish country?" her mother asked. "Near Amish country. I'll still have electricity, Mom." But why? How could she explain that she'd been moving toward this moment for 15 years? That everything else had been just marking time? In March, Jacob told her he was thinking about going home for a visit. "Not to stay," he said quickly. "Just to see them, to see him." "That's brave, or stupid. I haven't decided yet." They were sitting in the garden where they'd first met, spring trying to push through winter's last grasp. "Come with me," he said suddenly. "Jacob, not to the farm, just to Lancaster. You could wait in town while I visit. I could use the moral support." Emma knew she should say no. It was too close to breaking her promise early, but Jacob looked so lost, this man caught between 2 worlds, that she nodded. "Just to Lancaster. Not to the farm." "Not to the farm," he agreed. They drove down on a Saturday, in early April. the Pennsylvania countryside exploding with spring green. Jacob was quiet most of the drive, his hands tight on the steering wheel. Emma had never seen him nervous before. He dropped her at a coffee shop in town, one that catered to tourists, with Wi-Fi and lattes and Amish-made pastries for sale. "I'll be back in 2 hours," he said. "Take as long as you need." But he was back in 45 minutes, his eyes red. "What happened? He wouldn't see me. Said I'd made my choice, that some bridges once crossed can't be crossed back." Emma's heart broke for him. "Jacob, I'm so sorry." He did say something, though, through Mary. She came out to the car. Jacob looked at her with that unreadable expression again. "He said to tell you October 5th. That's the day you should come. That's the exact day. 15 years exactly." "I know. He remembers everything I told you." They drove back mostly in silence, but as they neared Philadelphia, Jacob spoke again. "I won't be here when you go back." "What? Why?" "Because this chapter needs to close for me. I've been living in limbo, half in, half out. When you keep your promise, it'll be done. The story will have an ending, and I can finally start my own story." Emma wanted to protest, but she understood they were both caught in the same narrative, waiting for the same resolution. "Where will you go?" "California, maybe. Somewhere where no one knows what an Amish person looks like. Somewhere I can just be Jacob, not Jacob who left." That night, Emma sat with her notebooks, all of them, from the first childish drawings to her completed thesis. 15 years of documentation, of preparation, of waiting. In 6 months she would turn 22. In 6 months she would return to Samuel Yoder's farm. In 6 months, a promise would be kept or broken, or transformed into something else entirely. She wrote, 21 years old, 6 months left. The waiting has shaped me more than the promise itself. I am who I am, because I've been becoming the person who could keep this promise. But now I wonder, when it's kept, who will I become then? Without this fixed point in my future, without this organizing principle of my life, what will I be? Jacob says endings allow new beginnings, but some endings feel like they might be endings all the way down. I'm scared, but I'm going anyway, because that's who I am now, the girl who goes anyway. She closed the notebook and looked at the calendar. October 15th was circled in red, as it had been on every calendar she'd owned for 15 years. 6 more months, the shortest and longest time in the world. October 15th came with a frost warning and skies the color of old pewter. Emma stood in front of the mirror in her Lancaster apartment, trying to decide what one wore to keep a 15-year-old promise. She'd been living in Lancaster for 4 months now, working at the library, helping Dr. Hartley with his research, existing in the same county as Samuel Yoder, but keeping to her word. She hadn't gone to the farm, hadn't driven past, hadn't even looked it up on Google Maps. She settled on a simple dress, not plain, but modest, navy blue with long sleeves. Her grandmother's locket at her throat. Her hair pulled back, but not severely. She looked like herself, she decided, just a more intentional version. The drive to the Yoder farm took 17 minutes. She knew because she hecked every second tick by on the dashboard clock. The roads were familiar now after months of living here, but her hands still shook on the steering wheel. She'd imagined this moment so many times, but imagination hadn't prepared her for the reality of it actually happening. The farm, when it came into view, was both exactly as she remembered and completely different. The new barn, built after the lightning strike, stood where the old one had, but it was slightly larger, slightly different in its angles. The house had been painted recently, white with green shutters, now instead of the blue she remembered. And there were more buildings, a second, smaller barn, what looked like a workshop, a greenhouse. She parked at the end of the driveway, not wanting to presume she would drive all the way up. So she got out of the car. She saw him. Samuel stood on the porch as if he'd been waiting. He was older, of course, 15 years older, his beard more grey than brown now, lines carved deeper around his eyes, but his posture was the same, that solid presence she remembered from the barn. Emma walked up the driveway, each step feeling both momentous and ordinary. When she reached the porch steps, she stopped. "Mr. Yoder," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'm Emma Sullivan. I came back." For a long moment, Samuel just looked at her. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his face, not the polite smile he'd given her parents all those years ago, but something deeper, more genuine. "I know who you are," he said. "I've been expecting you." He gestured to a rocking chair on the porch, and Emma sat. He took the chair beside her, and for a moment they just rocked in silence, looking out over the fields. "Star died," Emma said finally. "Jacob told me." She did, but she had 3 foals first. "Would you like to meet them?" Emma nodded, not trusting her voice. They walked to the barn, the new barn built where the old one had stood. Inside it smelled the same hay and horses, and that particular scent of Amish farms that was somehow both work and peace. 3 horses stood in stalls, all with variations of stars coloring. "Faith, hope and charity," Samuel said, pointing to each. "Mary named them." "Where is Mary?" Emma asked. "At the schoolhouse, teaching. She'll be home soon." He paused. "Hannah is in Indiana. Her mother is dying. Jacob told me." Samuel's jaw tightened at his son's name, but he nodded. "You've been meeting with him. He's been helping me understand." "Understand what?" "Why this promise mattered so much. To me, to you." Samuel was quiet for a long moment, his hand stroking Hope's muzzle. "When you came into my barn that day, I had been praying, asking God why he took Sarah, why he gave me a daughter, only to take her before she could draw breath. And then you appeared, 7 years old, the age she would have been." Emma's throat felt tight. "I didn't know. How could you? You were a child. But you asked to carry our child," meaning Star, but the words were what I'd been praying someone could do. "Carry the child we lost. Carry her memory forward." "Is that what I've been doing?" Samuel looked at her directly for the first time since she'd arrived. "You tell me. 15 years you've held this promise. My son tells me you studied our ways, learned our language, wrote your thesis about us. Why?" Emma thought about all her notebooks, all her research, all the nights she'd wondered the same thing. "Because that day in your barn was the most real thing I'd ever experienced. Everything in my life was changing. My parents, our home, everything uncertain. But you were so certain, so grounded. And when you told me to come back, it gave me something to move toward, a fixed point in the future. And now you're here. Now I'm here. What do you want, Emma Sullivan?" It was the question she'd been avoiding. What did she want? To fulfill the promise. She was doing that, to see the farm again. She was here, but there was something more, something she'd only recently admitted to herself. "I want to understand what it means to belong somewhere," she said finally. "My whole life, I've been between places, between parents, between cities, between worlds. You and your community, you belong. You know who you are." Samuel was quiet for so long Emma thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "We know who we're supposed to be. It's not always the same as who we are. Jacob chose his path. It grieves me, but I understand it. The English world called to him louder than this one." He paused, "Just as this world has been calling to you." Before Emma could respond, they heard buggy wheels on gravel. Mary was home. She climbed down from the buggy with practiced ease, then stopped short when she saw Emma. She was beautiful, Emma realized, 23 years old, with the kind of serene face that belonged in paintings. But there was something else there too, a sadness maybe, or just resignation. "You came," Mary said simply. "I promised." Mary looked between Emma and her father, something passing between them that Emma couldn't read. "I'll make tea," Mary said, and disappeared into the house. They sat on the porch again, the 3 of them, drinking tea that tasted of mint and honey. The sun was setting, painting the farm golden, and Emma felt a peace she hadn't experienced in years. I want to tell you something, Samuel said suddenly, about promises. Both women turned to him. When my Rebecca died, with Sarah, I made God a promise. I said if he ever sent me a sign that Sarah's brief life had meaning, I would dedicate myself to building bridges between our world and the English. I would stop seeing separation as only protection. He looked at Emma. Then you appeared, a 7-year-old English girl who wanted to carry our child. But I know what you meant, but God often speaks in confused words and mixed meanings. That's how we know it's him and not our own thoughts. Mary made a sound, maybe agreement, maybe skepticism. For 15 years, Samuel continued, I've kept my promise. I've worked with Dr. Hartley, welcomed English volunteers at barn raisings, tried to show that we can maintain our ways while still extending grace to others. And for 15 years, I've waited to see if you would keep yours. And now I see that promises aren't about the ending, but about the keeping. You've been keeping this promise every day for 15 years, not just today when you arrived, but every day you chose to remember, to prepare, to honor what a 7-year-old girl said in a barn. Emma felt tears sliding down her cheeks. I don't know what happens now. I built my whole life toward this moment, and now you start building toward the next moment, Mary said quietly. It was the longest sentence she'd said since arriving. That's all any of us do. They sat in silence as darkness fell, the only sounds the creaking of rocking chairs and the distant lowing of cattle. Finally, Emma stood to leave. Thank you, she said to Samuel, for remembering, for waiting. Will you come back? He asked. Emma looked at Mary, who was watching her with an unreadable expression, then back at Samuel. If I'm welcome, you're welcome, Mary said suddenly, surprising them all. This family has been waiting for something for 15 years. Maybe what we were waiting for wasn't a visit, but a beginning. Emma nodded, not trusting herself to speak. As she walked to her car, Samuel called out, Emma Sullivan. She turned. The child you carried, Sarah's memory. You can put it down now if you want. You've brought her home. Emma sat in her car for a long moment before driving away, watching the farmhouse windows glow with lamplight. She'd kept her promise. The story that had defined her for 15 years was complete. But as she drove back to Lancaster, she realized Mary was right. This wasn't an ending. It was, maybe finally, a beginning. Emma returned to the Yoder farm 3 days later, bringing fresh bread from the Lancaster bakery and uncertainty in her heart. She'd spent those 3 days in a daze, walking through her library job, her research work, her normal life, while feeling like she was floating somewhere outside her body. The promise was kept. The waiting was over. So why did she feel more unsettled than ever? Mary answered the door this time, flour dusting her apron. Baking day, she explained, taking the bread with a small smile. Though your store bread puts mine to shame. I doubt that. Come in. Father's in the workshop. The house was different from what Emma had expected. Simpler, yes, but also warmer. Handmade furniture polished to a glow, quilts on every chair, and something indefinable that made it feel like a home rather than just a house. Tea? Mary asked. I could help with the baking instead if you'd like. Mary studied her for a moment, then nodded. Can you follow directions? I'm excellent at following directions. I've been following one for 15 years. Mary laughed, a surprised, genuine sound. That's true, isn't it? They worked side by side, kneading dough for the week's bread. Mary was patient but exacting, correcting Emma's technique with gentle precision. You're not married, Emma said after a while, then immediately regretted it. I'm sorry, that's none of my business. Everyone makes it their business, Mary said, without bitterness. The rebellious Yoder daughter who refuses all suitors. Why do you refuse them? Mary was quiet for so long Emma thought she wouldn't answer. Then because I watched my father mourn my mother, my birth mother, Rebecca, for 7 years before he remarried. And even now with Hannah, it's duty more than love. I decided I'd rather have no marriage than a dutiful one. That's brave, or foolish. Depends who you ask. Mary shaped a loaf with practiced hands. What about you? 22 and no husband. 22 is young in the English world. Not so young. What have you been waiting for? Emma considered the question. To find out who I am when I'm not waiting, I guess. Samuel appeared in the doorway then, sawdust in his beard. Emma, good. I have something to show you. He led her to the workshop, Mary following. Inside, among the usual tools and half-finished furniture, was a chest, cedar, by the smell, with intricate carving on every surface. I started this 15 years ago, Samuel said. The day after you left, I thought if she keeps her promise she'll need something to mark it. Emma ran her fingers over the carvings, a barn, horses, the covered bridge, and in the center, a small girl and a bearded man, connected by curved lines that might have been wind or time or promise itself. It's beautiful, she whispered. It's yours. For your hope chest. Emma's cheeks flushed. A hope chest was for marriage items. For a future home. I'm not. Hope isn't just for marriage, Samuel said gently. It's for whatever future you're building toward. That evening, Emma stayed for dinner. It was simple, soup and bread, and preserved vegetables, but there was something about eating at their table, saying their prayers, even though she didn't understand the German, being included in their rhythm that made her feel both foreign and familiar. Where's Hannah? She asked carefully. Still in Indiana, Samuel said. Her mother's death is slow. It could be weeks yet. You must miss her. Samuel and Mary exchanged a glance. We manage, Mary said, which wasn't really an answer. After dinner, as Emma prepared to leave, Mary walked her to her car. Come back tomorrow, she said suddenly. It's wash day. I could use help. You want me to help with laundry? I want. Mary paused, seeming to struggle with words. It's been lonely here. Jacob gone, mother gone, father lost in his own thoughts. You're different, you're English, but you understand, or try to. I'll come, Emma promised. And she did, not just the next day, but the day after that, and the day after that. She fell into the rhythm of the Yoder household like she'd been waiting to find it her whole life. Mornings at the library, afternoons at the farm, helping Mary with household tasks, listening to Samuel's stories about farming and faith, learning the delicate balance of being present without intruding. 2 weeks into this pattern, Dr. Hartley called her into his office. You've been spending a lot of time at the Yoder farm. Is that a problem? Not necessarily, but Emma, you need to be careful. You're a researcher, not what? Not family. The words stung more than they should have. I know what I am. Do you? Because from where I sit, it looks like you're trying to fill a gap in their family that isn't yours to fill. Emma wanted to protest, but she couldn't. Wasn't that exactly what she was doing? Playing the role of the daughter who stayed, the helper Hannah should have been, the bridge between worlds that Jacob had abandoned. That afternoon she arrived at the farm to find a buggy she didn't recognize in the driveway. Inside, Mary sat with a young Amish man, both of them stiff and formal in the parlor. Emma, Mary said, relief flickering across her face. This is Thomas Byler, Thomas Emma Sullivan, the English friend I mentioned. Thomas looked at Emma with barely concealed disapproval. You're the one who's been visiting every day. I've been helping Mary with the household work, Emma said carefully. That's family work or community work. Emma is, Mary started, then stopped. What was Emma? Not family, not community, something in between, undefined. I should go, Emma said. I didn't mean to interrupt. Don't, Mary started, but Thomas was already standing. I should go as well. Mary, I'll call again next week. Perhaps we can speak privately then. After he left, Mary slumped in her chair. The 6th suitor this month. Father's been encouraging them. He thinks with mother gone, I'm lonely enough to accept someone. Are you? Lonely? Yes. Desperate? No. She looked at Emma. You didn't have to leave. Thomas was right. I'm not family. No. Mary agreed. But you're something. We just don't have a word for it yet. That evening, Emma found Samuel in the barn, tending to Hope, who was heavily pregnant. Like mother, like daughter, he said, running his hands over the horse's swollen sides. Due any day now. Samuel, Emma said, gathering courage. Am I causing problems by being here? He was quiet for a moment. Change causes problems, but lack of change causes death. Which is worse? That's not really an answer. No? Then let me be clearer. He turned to face her. 15 years ago, you brought something into our lives, possibility. The possibility that connections could exist across worlds. That promises could matter more than circumstances. Now you're here, and that possibility is becoming real. Reality is always more complex than possibility. Should I stop coming? Do you want to stop? Emma thought about her apartment in Lancaster, quiet and modern and empty. About her library job, pleasant but purposeless. About the life she'd built around a promise that was now kept, leaving her adrift. No, she admitted. Then don't, but understand. If you stay, you're choosing more than just visits. You're choosing to be part of our story, and we'll become part of yours. I think you already are. Samuel smiled. Yes, but there's a difference between being part of a story and living it. That night, Emma sat with her notebooks again, but this time she wrote something different. October 30th, 22 years old. The promise is kept, but something new is beginning. I don't know what to call it. Dr. Hartley warns me about getting too involved. Mary calls me something we don't have a word for yet. Samuel talks about choosing to live the story instead of just being part of it. I think about Jacob, who left to find himself, and me, who came here to find myself. Maybe we were both right. Maybe leaving and staying are just different ways of choosing who you want to become. Tomorrow is wash day again. Mary needs help. Or maybe I need to help. I can't tell the difference anymore. She closed the notebook and looked at the hope chest Samuel had made her, sitting now in the corner of her apartment. 15 years he'd worked on it, adding a little each year, believing she would return. That was faith, she realized. Not just believing in God, but believing in people. Believing that promises matter, that connections endure, that a 7-year-old's words could shape a lifetime. Tomorrow she would go back, and the day after, and the day after that. Not because of a promise this time, but because of a choice. The choice to stop waiting for life to happen and start living it instead. Even if she didn't quite know what that life would look like yet. Even if there wasn't a word for what she was becoming.